Hello.
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 Thanks for it's so nice that we could support such a small film like this, you know, with a nice big thing like this. So the trailer's awesome. You just saw the movie's fantastic. I got to see it, humble brag, but it's so good. I guess, Francis, for you coming in, you directed Catching Fire, obviously. What kind of, was there a steep learning curve, I guess, for you coming in on the, that you picked up and then learned or carried over to this film?
No, I'm not sure there was really a learning curve. I mean, I think that when coming on to Catching Fire, I was definitely the new kid on the block, and I had some stuff. I had to prove myself. I think to the actors, to the fans, to the studio, to everybody, and was very relieved, especially because we were already shooting the Mockingjay movies when Catching Fire was released and luckily embraced. So I think there was a little more comfort going into the Mockingjay movies, but really. I was already pretty immersed in the world, and the cast is fantastic, and so I wouldn't necessarily say that there was a learning curve.
And Natalie, you were obviously new kid on the block then, like Francis, for this film, because you weren't in the last one. With a close-knit cast like this, I've seen the videos, they're all very goofy. Jennifer Lawrence and Liam and Josh, they like to get along very well. So how was that for you coming into this tight-knit group, I guess, and establishing yourself in that group?
It was quite useful to begin with because art kind of mirrored life. Cressida turns up with her camera crew and we're like, hi guys, we're going to be here now for a while. And so it was the same. So that parallel helped us, but we were embraced very quickly. Like you said, it's a very warm, happy, buoyant set, lots of fun. And when you're working those long days and doing really intensive shooting in physical conditions, you bond very quickly. So
your character's great because obviously you're a director. For those of you who don't know the books, Cressida is kind of in charge of directing the propaganda campaigns in the films. I guess playing a director, what kind of inspirations do you have for what was your who were directors you were like, I'm going to try to be like this director or whatever?
I hang around with cool directors quite a lot. So it was really nice to play someone who works on the other side of the camera. It was like my ode to all the cool people that I've worked with in the last 10 years. And I'm with a director. So he actually helped me shoot my audition tape on his 7D.
I didn't know
Did you
that.
know we'd never had
I
that
didn't
conversation?
Know that, no.
Yeah. Anthony was like, no, you don't do that when you want to say, yeah. He was like, gave me some tips. And I sent the tape off to Francis. I mean, he liked it, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things that's sort of different about Natalie's character from, I think, what I do is that she's more of an embedded journalist, out in a war zone. And, her job is to now sort of wait for these kind of really emotionally charged, horrible things to happen and then start kind of pushing Katniss's buttons. And I think Natalie's strength worked really well in those scenes because she's really able to do that well.
Francis really helped me. He allowed me he encouraged me to ad-lib. He was like, just don't stick to the script. Like, if you want your cameramen to move to the left, then ask them to move to the left. And if you want to interrupt Jen and then make her start the line again, play around a bit. So you feel like you're in control, else it's quite a difficult thing to pull off. And you giving me that freedom really helped. And quite a lot made it into the film, actually.
Oh, yeah, a lot of it.
Yeah.
And in part 2 as well.
Nice.
And is that something where you wouldn't tell Jen that you were going to do that and then cut her off so she's kind of
No.
thrown off guard
Francis
too?
was like, don't tell Jen.
Okay, yeah, right.
Just interrupt her at this point. It will really annoy her.
And not only, I mean, the other thing I found really fascinating, kind of like a meta thing for Francis. So when Katniss is first filming these propaganda films, she's becoming the Mockingjay, and she's completely terrible at it right at the beginning. And you have to have basically an amazing actress, Oscar winner Jennifer Lawrence, being a bad actress. And I guess, how do you direct such a good actress to be so bad?
We shot that sequence over the course of about 2 days, and we did lots and lots and lots of takes. It was actually a really fun 2 days, shooting both her stuff and Phil's stuff. And we shot a huge range of comedy. And so we went as naturalistic as possible, where she's actually trying to do a good job with those lines, and then we went really, really broad. And then that way, looking at it together with the whole movie, we could really kind of adjust the levity factor to match the tone of the movie, because we didn't want it to be too broad. but we definitely wanted, we wanted some humor.
I think that's one of the things I really liked about this film. I feel like the third book here in the trilogy is maybe like, controversial among fans. Some don't like it as much as the previous two. And in this, I feel like you don't change that much, but it's really good, this first half. And I think a lot of that is because of the humor, and you're hitting the satire a lot harder. And I guess, was that something that was really important to you to like hit? Because a lot of the media satire, and I feel like even like the celebrity obsession satire even works really well here.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, look, quite honestly, it's one of the reasons to split the book into two movies, is because I think that there really are two distinct stories, and I also think that they're thematically different. And I think this one was really the chance to explore the propaganda war and the use of manipulating images and manipulating people, and you really get to see Katniss used as a symbol. And you get to see the fake version up against what happens when she's out in the real world. And, I think it's really, really interesting. I've totally lost track of your question now.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, for me watching it, obviously, because it's, you're watching the biggest movie star in the world playing this part, I think it's really interesting where it's like, Katniss, when they're kind of manufacturing her image, she's not great. And then when she gets to be herself, it's like she really succeeds. That's a great message, I think, in and of itself. But I feel like for a celebrity, too, it's kind of like, very interesting and timely. So I guess, Natalie, for you too, how do you make sure you're keeping your own self, while at the same time being a very public celebrity, I guess?
But that's why Jennifer Lawrence is the perfect choice to play Katniss Everdeen. No, it totally is, because, everyone knows Jennifer's reputation is that she doesn't buy into that superficial, that she, nature of the more BS nature, aspects of the industry, and that she is candid, she is straight talking, she is warm, she finds it very hard to be anything other than herself. And, it's a point of integrity, it's great. And that's the same with Katniss. And that's her charismatic quality, both Jennifer's and Katniss Everdeen's, they just have to be natural in themselves.
Yeah, and for you, do you have to fight against that too? In your own life as a celebrity, because you seem very nice. Do you want to Is it hard?
You don't know me.
So this is you're putting it on. That's fine.
Talk to this guy. I've been working for 18 hours and I'm pissed off and I want to go to bed.
Yeah, we had a couple of days like that.
Go ahead, Francis. You can let it all out now. It's fine. No one's watching. It's all fine. Yeah. I wanted to ask you both about this. One of my favorite scenes in the film is, and Jennifer Lawrence has talked about this a lot on the press tour, about how she hates hearing her own singing voice, but it's in the hanging tree. In the book, she sings this song that, Katniss sings a song that her father had sung her, and you have the lyrics in the book. And the movie, you kind of really blow it out. It's she actually sings this song. It's a really great song, honestly, and the way it cuts together is really great. And I guess, so for you, Francis, what was, how did that come together? Why did you decide on the folk rocky sound for that song and stuff? And how did that all work?
Well, the idea came from the idea from the song for the song came from the book, and Suzanne Collins wrote the lyrics. And the idea was that it was kind of an old Appalachian folk song that her father had taught her. And so I knew we needed a melody like that. And the Lumineers had written a really beautiful song for the Catching Fire soundtrack. And I thought they could probably tackle something like that if they were interested. So I called them up, they're great guys, and asked them if they'd be interested. And the next day, they sent me a recording of somebody whistling the tune and also a woman singing it. And it was perfect. And so we hooked Jen up with a vocal coach who just shifted the key of the song to fit Jen's voice a little better. And she trained a little bit, but she can actually sing in key, and she has a great quality to her voice, but she feels very vulnerable about singing, and she knew she was going to have to sing all day. I think that was also your first day of work. I think that was Natalie's first day on the job. I think it was day 4 of shooting Mockingjay. And and Jen was not happy that she had to sing it all day long, and she cried a little bit in the morning, actually.
This is director manipulation. Because it worked for the scene. Yeah. This is where the crossover is.
Yeah, and it did work for the scene. And the great thing with all her nerves and everything, what you hear in the movie is her singing on that day in the quarry live. It wasn't pre-recorded, wasn't recorded later, wasn't tweaked by music people or anything like that. And then it sort of came together. And I'm really pleased with that sequence. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, and Natalie, for you, like, what was it like watching her, I guess, have to go through that then, like, you know, in that day?
I just felt for her. I don't like singing either, so I just felt for her.
Well, one of the cool things, again, talking about Natalie's stuff is that I like is, you know, she's singing this song and there's this kind of haunting song, but she's, of course, sees an opportunity. So, you know, they're just sitting around, you know, having a break and a snack and some water by a lake, and she sees the opportunity, so she starts having it filmed so it can actually become something else.
You mentioned before about, like, you know, this film thematically kind of is a lot different from the second half of the film. I guess for you guys, splitting it up, how did, like, that's become very in vogue, but I feel like it really works here, you know, like with this, maybe more so than it did in some of the previous films that have, or young adult franchises that have done this. So I guess, you know, how would you decide where to split? We don't have to spoil the ending, obviously, but how did you decide, like, where you wanted to split it in the book and how much you could get done in this film and then save for the next film?
Well, you know, we knew very early on what the dramatic question was going to be structurally for each of the stories. So we knew, in general, where we were going to split the book. There was a little bit of wiggle room within, I'd say, like a 5 or 6 scene spread. So the movie itself actually does not end where the script ended. And so there was a little bit of a wiggle room, but in general, we knew.
Oh, that's interesting. So did you?
But it was all based on the idea of what the questions were that we set up for each of the specific stories within the book.
And again, not to get into spoilers, but I feel like there's a lot of stuff maybe that has to happen in the next film, I guess, especially with Julianne's character, President Coin. Have you guys, like, you know, how is that, are you putting together part 2 right now, and how is that all coming, like, working out, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's coming together well. I mean, primarily because we shot for, you know, close to a year, and we finished in June. We really had to make the big push to finish part 1. So primarily through the shoot and, you know, up until now, we've been really focusing on 1. We've cut most of the visual effects sequences for part 2 to turn those over to the effects companies, but really, as a whole, I'm, you know, probably going to get started in the new year on part 2.
One of the things, we just watched a trailer, obviously, a little while ago, and I think it's really fun. You mentioned going back to the propaganda stuff in the film. There, you know, you guys cut together, like, basically like a trailer for Mockingjay that you play in Mockingjay. So it gets very meta. I guess, like, I think that I love that sequence. I guess, like, how, you know, what was that like putting that together and, like, even doing that, you know, in, like, the District 8 stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the ideas that I always thought was really great that Suzanne had in her book about the propaganda was that, you know, you have the fake attempt, right? The attempt where Katniss is going to act, and obviously that fails miserably. And then you put her out in the real world, and there's this horrific thing that happens, and she now can speak from her gut and gives this really emotional speech. So one version of a clip of that would just be the single shot of her giving that speech, which could be very moving, right? But that wouldn't be Cressida or Plutarch style, right? Because this is now, you know, the objective of this propaganda piece would be to sort of enlist more people, to give more people courage, right? So they sort of spruce it up. You get this great kind of patriotic music playing on it. You cut it. They probably actually got some pickups of Katniss shooting an arrow because they weren't actually there when she shot the hovercraft down. And you sort of build it, and you put some great graphics, and now you have a pretty glitzy propaganda piece. And so to be able to see the manipulation of images and events for different emotional values.
Right. Natalie, did you have, like, I mean, you mentioned, like, Francis mentioned how it's kind of like you're almost like a war journalist, I guess. Did you look into that stuff too, like, as part of preparation for your role, like what, like, a war photographer, you know, video journalist does as preparation?
Yeah, I mean, you only need to turn on the news and all the imagery you see around the world at the moment. Right. Unfortunately, we're all too much inundated with those kind of images. And actually, the day we shot District 8, when we were walking as a group through the line of dead bodies, you know, I actually turned to Francis and talked to him about something that was happening somewhere particularly in the world the day before, where the image of lines and lines of cadavers was almost identical. And it's harrowing, but it's testament to how good the production design on the movie was, that it looks so accurate to what's going on in the world. It's harrowing for obvious reasons, but then it's positive insofar as it means that we are giving these big social, political themes to a young audience, and we're not talking down to them. They're more than capable of handling, you know, these big, like, sad themes that are to do with our modern world. So, and everyone who's carrying a smartphone now can be a documentary journalist, and no one knows that better than, you know, the age group that were reading Suzanne Collins's novels.
Yeah. Do you feel like you almost, I mean, like, obviously it's in the novels too, but do you feel like you're, like, almost getting away with something by being able to put so much subversive, like, imagery in a film that's, like, meant for, like, major, wide release audiences? I mean, because it's pretty, like, some of the stuff, like you said, it's really harrowing and, like, kind of shocking, like, that this is in a, you know, this kind of film, which in a good way.
I don't feel like I'm getting away with anything, but I do have to say, though, that I feel so lucky to have been a part of a set of stories like this that actually are about something. I mean, you know, Suzanne set about creating stories about the consequence of war for teenagers and built everything from that. And so the fact that you've got these stories that have reached so many people that are actually about something and are relevant is really exciting. It's so rare to find stories that are so popular that are about anything, you know, that aren't just sort of popcorn fluff. And I just feel really lucky as opposed to feeling like I'm getting away with something.
Do you have, like, what was, for you, what is, in this film, what is your favorite scene, I guess? Like, what would you say, like, if you had to show one scene to somebody from Mockingjay Part 1, be like, this is, like, the best part. Well, I'm going to, like, you know, Sophie's Choice and all, but, like, what would you pick?
That's always tricky. I'm really happy with a lot of the movie. I mean, I like that hanging tree sequence where she sings the song. I think it's really moving. I really like the way it builds. I like the contrast of the quiet to the build and action. I like the emotional value of the sequence. Yeah, I'm proud of that one.
And Natalie, you were in Rush, obviously, with Chris Hemsworth, and you're in this with Liam Hemsworth. I guess if I had to ask you to pick a favorite Hemsworth, would you be able to do that?
I can't do that. There's a third one out there as well, apparently.
There is. You
I
could
need
pick
the hat
him.
trick.
Maybe it's him. You never know, right?
Yeah, there's the older brother.
Okay, I think we could open it up to audience questions now. If anybody has any, we could get going. I'm sure there's tons. So we got one over here, a guy in blue.
Hey, I'm the guy in blue. So I wanted to know, what Game of Thrones character do you think would win the Hunger Games, and why?
Brienne of Tarth. Because like Katniss Everdeen, she's a woman who is playing what would be traditionally previously given as a male role. And she's had to work that extra hard to get where she is. She's full of determination, like Katniss. So my good friend Gwendolyn Christie.
Good question. Any other questions we have here? Over here in the back at the green. Hold on, we have a mic coming.
Oh, and she's in the movie. Oh, she's in the next movie. I've just realized. Yeah, she's the other Game of Hunger Thrones girl.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's like, totally, yeah, Gwendolyn's in Mockingjay too. What am I
Synergy,
thinking?
it's really good. Yeah.
I know you filmed part of the movie in Atlanta. I just moved here from Atlanta. What did y'all like most about filming there?
What did I like best about filming in Atlanta? The food. The food was unbelievable. Actually, I think everybody really grew to love Atlanta. I mean, we missed home, obviously, but if you have to be somewhere to shoot, Atlanta was a fantastic place. The restaurants are unbelievable. The people are really nice. It's really beautiful. Loads and loads of trees, lots of land. I enjoyed my time there, other than we were in the polar vortex 3 or 4 times and were shut down because of ice storms and things like that. But other than that, it was okay.
Any other questions? Let's see. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Kelly. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciated the comment about how the film's power to talk about and discuss socio-political climates that are happening right now. And I wonder if either of you can point to what you feel is the the message that you're hoping is being spread, especially to youth, like the target audience that you mentioned, and what you hope that they're taking away from these films?
Well, I think in general, again, to go back to the source material, the whole reason for the books existing is really to teach about the consequence of war. You know, Suzanne grew up with a military academic father who taught her about war, and she wanted to write a series of books for kids and then for teenagers. And I think that's the overall theme, but then I think individually through the movies, there's various sort of facets of that we explore. So in this one, right, we're talking about the manipulation of imagery and war, and it's actually kind of a war of the airwaves, and the use of people, you know, in that imagery, and you know that there's a cost to that. That you know, it may be worth risking somebody's life to get an image that could inspire, and I think that's kind of one of the big important messages in part one.
Cool. Any other questions? Well, you guys think I have one for Francis. By the time this next movie comes out, you'll been working on a Hunger Games film then for about 4 years? No,
it's about
3 years.
It'll be 3 years. Yeah, 3 movies in 3 years.
So that kind of schedule and stuff. I mean, like, are you like looking like? I don't know. Are you looking forward to having it like not in your life, or is it like kind of like you're really going to miss it? I don't mean that as a negative, but I mean like doing the same thing for 3 years. Like,
yeah, I'm gonna miss it. I think it was a lot of work, and we were away from home for a really long time. But it was a really sad day when we wrapped, and I think I'm gonna be really sad when the next movie comes out and the last sort of press stop is over, and that's kind of it. Jen keeps talking about how we're gonna have reunions. You know, like college reunions. You have to get everybody back together.
Oh, you can make another movie. I'm sure people would love that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I have one. Sorry.
Over here? Yeah, there we go.
Thank you guys for being here today. Fans of the book, I think, were really pleased with Catching Fire. And with book adaptations, it's always kind of a difficult line to draw when you're putting it on the big screen. So is there anything that you can foresee in part 1 and part 2, since you guys split it up? Any liberties that you guys took that maybe fans of the book will not be pleased with, or?
Well, no, I'm hoping that they'll definitely be pleased with it. I mean, you know, I think going in, when I first met on Catching Fire, my intention was always to make the books, not to reinvent. You know, there's always change in the adaptation process, and especially with Mockingjay, it's especially the first half, so part 1, it's a very internal part of the book. And so we had to make it a much more external and make Katniss much more active, and we also had to see the effects that she has on the revolution. And so that meant sort of what we call, and what Suzanne calls, world expansion. And so working along with Suzanne Collins, we sort of expand the world a little bit, which I think can only be exciting for fans. So even people who know the books very, very well can still be surprised when they see new scenes and sequences and the scenes and sequences that we've expanded.
Natalie, were you a huge fan of the books before you signed on to this, or was that not on your radar? I mean, I'm sure it was on your radar because they're humongous books, but I mean, were you a fan?
I was a huge fan of the first movie. I'd seen the first movie and was incredibly impressed by it. No, I hadn't read Suzanne Collins' novels, but obviously as soon as I got the role, I read all of them, and again, was really impressed. They're page turners, and it's very interesting the way they're written from the POV of Katniss, and the way that Francis and the producing team have translated that with being as faithful as possible, but losing the first person direct in a monologue. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? Back there. Oh, we got one up front here.
Hi, I'm Christina from Cambio. I read that originally when you got the role, Natalie, that you were going to have to shave your head for the part. How relieved were you that you didn't have to shave your entire head? And why did you decide to not do that, Francis?
We had a phone call together. How did it go? Whose idea was it? It was both our ideas.
It was both our idea, but what I will say is one of the first things that she said on the phone call was that she was willing to shave her entire head. So she was down to do it. But we, I think, actually, and oddly, both had the same idea. And we both sent each other, I think, the same pictures. We both had some of the same references of the sort of the side shave, especially with all the tattoo work. So there was some of the same references that we had.
Simpatico.
But what I liked, part of the reason for it was that I liked the sort of irreverence of it, that there was a practicality to it, and that it was also sort of an easy thing that she wasn't going to have to mess with a lot, but that Cressida has a kind of an irreverence, and there's almost a punk sensibility to her.
What was the reference, or was it just like a random Google image search?
Well, no, there's a I think she's Brazilian model called Alice Deal. And I never asked you this. Were you inspired by Trish from Catching Fire?
Yeah.
Yeah, that costume designer
Yes.
on Catching Fire rocks a similar kind of look. So we had the same image kind of in our head. But then it was just the practicality, because Mockingjay 2 gets so physical, we had to make it a length that was practical for running around with a gun.
And how long did it take you to get the tattoos put on your head every day?
V. Neal, our amazing Oscar-winning makeup designer, she got it down pretty quick. The first time we did it, trying to line up everything, and all the way down the arm as well, took about 4 hours. But by the time we got to the end of the shoot, we were doing hair, makeup, the whole works in under 2 hours.
And that's funny, because you don't even see on your arm. I mean, you don't actually even see some of that, right? Like, I don't...
Oh, it wasn't put on the days you didn't see it. I'm not an idiot.
Okay, I was going to say, like, what are you doing?
Yes, you do. You see every little detail.
I was like, I would go and check the costume in the morning, and I would say to the second, they're not seeing this part tomorrow. We don't need to do this part. I want half an hour more in bed, please.
Any other questions from the audience? Another one up front.
So you talked a little bit about the music with the Lumineers writing the one song, but I had read that Lord was appointed the curator for the music for this film, and I was wondering how much of a role you had in that and how that decision kind of came about.
Yeah, she curated the soundtrack. So because because of the world that the Hunger Games movies live in, really we don't have any pop songs in the score at all. It's actually just all score. So she and I had a conversation originally about doing a cover of The Hanging Tree for the end credits. And I sent her Jen singing, and she really liked it. And she had these ideas of these kind of sort of turn-of-the-century soul songs. And she didn't do a Hanging Tree cover, but she did her own song that ended up going on the end of the movie and did a really, really beautiful job. And she's a really smart, talented girl. And we decided, in trying to figure out how to create a soundtrack that feels special, and she really understood the stories and the characters and loves the movies and obviously has great taste, we thought, you know what, instead of a room, honestly, of film executives all voting on what bands they like and trying to fill a soundtrack that way, why don't we have somebody who's got sort of more of a singular vision for it and create something special. And so we basically handed the soundtrack to her. And she went around and called people she knew and got all the artists together and curated the songs.
Natalie, I want to ask you, obviously we have Game of Thrones fans here as well. I mean, do you have how have you noticed the differences in the fan bases? Like, there's such a humongous fan base for Hunger Games and also Game of Thrones. I mean, have you gotten do you notice anything different between the two?
Well, hopefully there's some crossover.
I think there will be, right? Yeah. There's arrows.
I'd like to bring each fandom to the party at the other table as well. I am so blessed at the moment to be a part of two projects that have some of the most dedicated, supportive, informed, enthusiastic would be the euphemistic way of terming it, fans that could possibly be. And I was at Comic-Con in San Diego in July and oscillating between the two casts. And it's pretty 50-50 on devotion and enthusiasm. Yeah.
And which cast is better? No, you don't have to answer. I'm sorry. I could tell by your silence you mean the Hunger Games.
No, but seriously, so many of I was reading the Hunger Games books whilst I was still shooting Game of Thrones. And so many of the Game of Thrones cast would come up to me and be like, oh my God, is that your next job? And we're like really stoked by the idea. And then, but that was the great thing of also the Hunger Games. We were all kind of fans of each other's work. True Detective was airing at the time we were shooting, and we all wanted to bug Woody about details of that, and Mahershala with House of Cards. And Jen got into Game of Thrones. She was a bit delayed. She's been busy, finally, while we were shooting. So it was really nice to all be kind of fanboys and girls of each other's work.
Very cool. Well, the movie's out next week, November 21st, so everyone should see it, Mockingjay. And thank you guys very much for joining us, Natalie and Francis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.